when you get hurt on duty and they're going to throw you out, they make you go to classes. It's called the Warrior Transition Unit, and you got to do it for like 18 months. So the first weekend I got there, everybody's playing cards, everybody's playing checkers, and I'm like, yeah,
this ain't working.
I'm like, this ain't working. Especially with my ADD, I'm like, yeah, I can't do this.
This is gonna hurt. It's time for the Suffering Podcast. What changed when you finally sobered up?
Well, as my uncle is the one that's bailing, one of the ones that are bailing me out. Now, he was a Korean War veteran, and he was a boxing champion of the Army and a Korean War veteran. And he was a badass. He was like 5'4", but he was just a fire plug. And he looked at me when I'm about to get locked up and bail you out. He's like, you know what? I knew you didn't have what it takes to be a military man.
Ooh. Ouch.
Yeah. And it just ate at me for like 9 months. I couldn't sleep at night. I'm like, because I respected him. I mean, he didn't have a 4th grade education, retired a multimillionaire, boxing champion, a Korean War hero. And he's telling me he knew I couldn't be a soldier. And it just ate at me. And I'm like, I got to get back in. Everyone's like, you can't get back in. You got thrown out. There's no way you can get back in. And somebody says, well, you can get it moved from from an under honorable to a general discharge. And you might be able to get into a National Guard unit. So I'm going, so you're saying there's a chance. So I had to get letters written by a congressman. I had to get letters written by my sponsor from AA. From my place where I was working, I had to get letters written. And I had to jump through hoops. And eventually I found a unit in Pennsylvania that said, all right, we'll take a chance on you. So they let me back in 1990, I think, or 91, they let me back in. And I was a shitty soldier. I was still a shitty soldier.
You were trying to learn how to be an adult.
I was struggling. But now, if you know me at all, anything that happened from ages 11 on is 100% my fault. I take 100% responsibility for it. So I was just being an asshole. And I was going to, I joined the National Guard and I got busted a couple more times. And I moved to South Carolina. I got busted a couple more times. And they were going to throw me out again at the end of September 2001. But because of what happened on 9/11, totally changed my whole world, rocked my world. And my whole life changed when they started pulling bodies out of the Pentagon. Because all my stuff, I'm watching the TV. You guys remember more than anybody. When that shit was happening, it was live.
Yeah.
I mean, there was no editing. There you could hear the bodies crashing, going through the
jumping out of the World Trade Center. You could hear bodies
bouncing,
on the
bouncing, and hitting cars, and we knew people that were in the buildings that day. But as I'm watching this unfurl, all my shit is on the right side of the TV because I got to turn all my shit in again. So I'm being thrown out again. And I looked at when they were pulling bodies out of the Pentagon, and I was like, I've wasted 27 years of my life. And all these guys and girls, all they want to do is go to work and come home. They're not coming home. And I literally broke down on my couch and I cried out to God. I said, Lord, give me another chance. I promise you that I'm going to dedicate the rest of my life to helping people that can't help themselves. So the man that woke up on the morning of September 11th is not the same guy that went to bed on September 11th. And even I went out and got my tattoo that I have right now. September 11th, some gave all. So for me, from that moment on, is when I've lived to help others.
That seemed like, was that your lowest point?
That was, and when I attempted suicide in Labor Day 2012. So there's three things, major impacts in my life. And 9/11 was probably one of the biggest.
But that was your start of the climb up, September 11th.
Yeah, and because once I realized, all right, I wasted 27 years. I'm not a child anymore, and I seen all my brethren being pulled out of the Pentagon, and I seen 343, firefighters and first responders get killed in the towers. All they do is want to go to work and come home. What am I doing with my life? And how can I honor them? And so that's that moment is where I said, I'm going to dedicate my life is helping people that can't help themselves.
You were on your journey from becoming worst to first.
Yeah.
Like you said, you were the worst officer in 3 years. It took you. So what changed, though? I mean, something had to change in the way you do daily business.
Well, what happened was, because I went to my first sergeant, my company commander. I called him that day, same day, and I'm like, I need to talk to you. And they're like,
You again?
they're like, wait a minute, you spend more time in his office than I do. And I said, listen, this is what happened. I'm like, I know you're going to throw me out. And I'm like, I'm okay with that because I deserve it 100%. I said, please keep me. And they both looked in my eyes, and I'm still friends with them today, like 30 years later. And they said, you're not the same man that you were last week. So, but then we had drill that weekend. And I decided my way's not working anymore. So I got there, like drill was at 7. I got there at 5. And there were still cars there before I got there. And the people that were there were early were all the high ranking brass. So I'm like, okay. And then I stayed till everyone went home. So when everybody else went home at 5, they were there at like 8 o'clock. And so I kind of put it together. Like in AA, they teach you, the best meetings happen before the meeting. Yeah. After the meeting, make the coffee.
Happens with podcasts too sometimes.
Yeah. So,
we have good conversations before we sit down.
Yeah. So, so I just said, okay, so I'm going to do what winners do. If success leaves clues, what are the winners doing and what are the losers doing? And then when I got there and they busted me from E4 to E0, so I'm back to nothing again. I started looking at what the E4s were doing, and I'm like, okay, if I do that, I'm going to stay there. So I started following all the E7s and E8s, like a pain in the ass. I was just that guy. I was up their ass constantly. And I'm asked, well, how did you do it? How did you become successful? Show me. I'm humble. Teach me. And I had some great NCOs that took me under their wings and said, you need to max your PT scores. You need to go to correspondence courses. You need to volunteer for everything. You need to go to classes. And I'm like, all right, I'm good. Just tell me what to do and I'll do it.
Well, you humbled yourself.
Oh, yeah.
So the question.
Plus, now you didn't have alcohol taking up most of your time.
Yeah. And I had to have something, I'm like, well, what do I do? If I'm going to be the best, what do I got to do? Like, if I want to be the best podcaster, I hired the best podcast coach, which is John Lee Dumas. He's my coach. So if I'm going to hire somebody, I want to see what the best is doing. But if I'm just hiring somebody just same as me or below me, I'm not going to get anywhere. And it hit me that day. Success leaves clues. So pick the winners and see what they do. Follow them.
So you go through your military career. You're doing well. Why leave the military?
My first drill in New Jersey, one of my vehicles broke down, and it was an up-armored Humvee. So if you ever seen the Humvees on Halo, that's what it looked like. And I was backing the guy off on 287, and instead of him hitting the brakes, he hit the gas and ran over the whole right side of my body, ran over my head, and that's why I'm blind. I'm blind today. So I got hurt on duty, and I shook it off because back then, I think I was like 175, shredded.
Sir, you just had a Humvee roll over your body.
Well, I was on other supplements at the time. But I just shook it off. But then I started, within 2 hours, I was totally blind. About 80% blind, I would say. And eventually they figured, well, you can't see, you can't shoot. So we don't need you. And then they medically discharged me after 23 years.
That had to be a big blow to your psyche, especially when you put that much work.
You put that much. You like you said, you screwed up 27 years of your life. Now you finally got back on track, and you're finally getting there. And then that happens.
Yeah. And even like you guys, I had you on my show. We talked. They don't ever tell you when you're going through, a boot camp or you're going through your classes that you got a shelf life. Nobody ever say, Kevin, you're not going to be a cop forever. And, we're mostly, most of the time, we're young, dumb, and full of cum. We think we're going to live forever.
Yeah.
Or but eventually when you got to hang up that uniform for the last time, well,
for both of us, we went to work,
Yeah.
and that night We were never allowed to go back.
Yeah. And when you're no longer that thing, you're no longer Sergeant Kevin. You're no longer this rank. You're no longer. They told me, you're no longer Sergeant Kaufman. Well, who am I? Who's Richard? Because I don't know I don't have a Richard. Everything was Sergeant Kaufman. Everything was 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Well, now, who am I? I don't have vision. I was back at, I think after like 6 surgeries, I was at like 50%, I think, 40%. So I don't have vision. I don't have money coming in.
So now you don't know what your future looks like.
No, because I'm like, well, and it scared me to death because I don't know who Richard is.
So how did you find out who Richard is?
Well, I attempted suicide, Labor Day 2012, because I knew I had till midnight to get out of the military. And if you die on duty, your wife or family gets like $500 grand. So I figured if I took myself out, they'd be taken care of. But like Mike Tyson says, everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the mouth. And my 6-month-old daughter saved my life actually that day. What happened was, when I was in the military, I always loved Dodge Rams. And I was like, I want to get a big pimped out Dodge Ram 1500. So I bought one. And so I got in the truck and I called my wife and I said, honey, I love you. And because we were down in Wildwood. So we're going to go down for the Wildwood for the weekend on Labor Day. I was going to meet her down there with the kids. And I knew I was going to take myself out. And I knew I was never going to talk to my wife again. And I told her I loved her. I've always loved you. And I told her, I had a 6-month-old baby at home, 2 boys. And I knew I was never going to see him again. I said, I know it's not. I'm never going to see you again. I can't tell her that. But, once I told her I loved her and I got in the car and my plan was, like I said, everybody has a plan until you get punched in the mouth. I get in the truck, hit 100 miles an hour, put it on cruise, put the radio on, and eventually I'm going to go off the road and because concrete pylons everywhere going down the shore. So that's what I did. I got up to like 100 miles an hour, put it on cruise, put the radio on. Now, I don't like country, but I put country music on. I don't know why. I'm like, am I going to die?
It's enough to make you kill yourself right there.
And so I got up to 100. I put on cruise control, and I got the I turned the radio on, and I just shut my eyes. And like when you're driving and you can feel the reflectors on the right side. All I hear is click, 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 click. I'm like, oh, I'm like 3 minutes from death. I'm like, it's 3 seconds from death. I'm like, this is a wrap. But then a song came on by George Strait. It was called I Saw God Today. And it was about a man seeing his baby for the first time. And it brought me back to the day my daughter was born. And I was the first one to ever hold her. The first one to ever change her diaper. And at that moment is when I decided, I don't want to be a victim. I don't want to be the number 22. I want to be a father. I want to be a husband. Screw the 500 grand. I'll find a way to take care of my family. And I pulled over and I called my wife and I told her what happened, and she was pissed off. I told her what I was going to do, and I said, honey, if I don't go home, if I don't get help this weekend, I'm probably going to go home and eat my gun. And she said, I got you. She says, I got your back. Just come home. Just be with us. I can't get you into treatment because it's a holiday weekend, but Tuesday we'll check you into treatment. And I started treatment at Labor Day 2012, and I've been seeing the same therapist for the last 12 years. So, I've had those 3 different things in my life, and that's why I wear the shirt all the time. It says, today I decide. Because I could have made that decision, to either go to jail or get sober.
Early on you said September 11th you decided to help those who couldn't help themselves. Well, the one person who needed the help the most, you can't help them, which was yourself.
Yeah.
And first thing they teach us in the police academy is you're no good at helping anybody else if you're messed up. So take care of yourself first, and then you'll be able to go out and do all that stuff. So how did you find this weird world of podcasting post-suicide attempt?
Well, it all has to do with the lunch I had with Mr. Gary Vaynerchuk. But when you get hurt on duty and they're going to throw you out. They make you go to classes. It's called the Warrior Transition Unit. And you got to do it for like 18 months. So the first weekend I got there, everybody's playing cards. Everybody's playing checkers. And I'm like, yeah.
This ain't working.
I'm like, this ain't working. Especially with my ADD. I'm like, yeah, I can't do this. So I picked up a book by Robert Kiyosaki and Sharon Lecter, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And then I finished whatever books they had. I did their series. And then I'm like, well, who else is in that personal development? And I went to Dale Carnegie, Andrew Carnegie, then Think and Grow Rich. And then I keep hearing this guy named Gary V. I'm like, who the hell is Gary V? And I found him on my phone. It wasn't a phone, it was a computer back then. And I'm like, it was nothing but Gary V for like a year. And my wife hated Gary V. She hated Gary V. He curses too much, and she still hates it. I put him on. She's like, shut him off. Just shut him off. But it got me interested to being a podcaster. And when I met him for lunch, he's the one that said, you need to write a book. You need to start a podcast. Your name is the comeback coach from now on. So he started he started everything. And that's how I started in the crazy world. Now
It sounds a lot better than the kicked out coach.
Yeah.
But now that's why I brought this here. I was 80% blind, and I did 300 episodes doing this on my phone. I recorded 300 episodes, not only having 40% vision, and having you, the Mr. Magoo glass, to see everything. 300 episodes.
Wow.
That's determination right there.
And that's why I still carry this around. That I had to use the Mr. Magoo glass for 18 months.
So out of how many episodes are you up to now?
1,200.
1,200?
Something stupid.
Yeah.
Something crazy.
What are you doing? Kevin was saying you're doing like 6 a day.
I did 6. I did 7 last week, and I only had like 5 today. So I'm good. It was
So-
an easy day.
Aside from this wonderful guest you had on Kevin Donaldson, what do you think your most impactful guest would be?
I've had so many. I think it might have been my first. Actually, one of my friend Aaron Hale. If you guys ever get a chance, he's not a veteran. I mean, a first responder, but he's a veteran. He's blind and he's deaf, and he just ran the Badwater 35.
Oh,
Blind and deaf, and almost beat David Goggins this time.
wow.
And he's blind and he's deaf.
That just shows you that the limitations are only those that you put on yourself.
Yeah. And the first guy I ever interviewed, he was blind. No, he had both arms blown off, both legs blown off in Iraq. And as I'm interviewing him, because I'm using Anchor at this time, it's just audio only.
Yeah.
His wife is holding it up to his ear because they're in Aspen skiing. And he's got no arms and no legs. And he's sitting in Aspen skiing. So I'm like, wow. So because I can't see, no big deal. I got both arms. I got I got 2 good arms, 2 good legs. What can I do?
So that's a lot. We know a gentleman, Earl Granville. We've had him in here. Earl got his leg blown off in Afghanistan. And he's part of Warrior Strong, right?
Yep.
Yeah, Warrior Strong.
Yeah.
And it's a whole club of these guys, and it's just pushing beyond your limits. And he's a motivational speaker, he's a great guy. But he shows me, like, here's Earl running these tough mudders and these ultra races and things like that. And here I got 2 good legs and 2 good arms, and I'm not doing that. So it starts to turn the mirror.
Sitting on the couch at night watching TV.
It starts to turn the mirror on you where I'm putting these limitations on myself, even though I'm perfectly capable of doing all that stuff. And it really gives you a great perspective on life from somebody who just has a never quit attitude.
Yeah. And that's how the podcast all started. Because anybody that's ever been successful, we've all got through shit. We're all dealing with the same shit. It just maybe at a different level, whether you're the CEO or the janitor. So how did you get from here to here?
We're in the same storm, but different boats.
Exactly. Right. So that that's how the whole podcast really started. Just tell me your story. How did you become successful? But what'd you go through to get there?
So I want you to give out your books too.
Okay.
So you have one coming out.
Yep, it's called the Podcast Blueprint. How we got over 2 million downloads, and how we, like I said, have guests, authors, athletes, millionaires, billionaires, Lee Steinberg, Dave Meltzer, Sharon Lecter, Robert Kiyosaki. How we've got these people on the show. What I did is I took everything that I spent over $60,000 and over 10,000 hours learning how to do this. So I just condensed it into one book.
And people look at where you are now, and they're like, "Wow, you're really lucky." I don't know if you've gotten that. People say, "Wow, you're really lucky." Like luck had very little to do with it. This is hard work.
And
You said something on one of your posts. Podcasting is a 4-letter word. It's work.
it's work. Yeah.
It's work. And
But it's relationships.
the harder you work, the better you're going to become at it.
But it's building relationships.
Yeah.
If I didn't meet Jessica Dalby, I wouldn't have met you. I wouldn't have met your amazing new sponsor. I wouldn't have
Sherry.
her on my show, but it was because I built a relationship with a friend of hers 6 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So it's building relationships that if you're going to be successful in anything, it's all
Sort of.
about building relationships.
It's connected dots.
The podcast connections are amazing.
Yeah.
They really are.
Oh, so
We've met so many people that we should never have met in our lives.
Speaking of that, I get a call from Tom Smith the other day, and he's like, a friend of mine, Karen Conti. She was John Wayne. I told you about her. She was John Wayne Gacy's last attorney before he was executed. And he calls me up and he goes, "Well, Kevin knows everybody, so I'm just going to give it." He looked her up on Instagram and saw that I follow her, and she follows me. Says, "Can you get me into Karen Conti? She just wrote a book called Killing Time." And I was like, "Yeah, matter of fact, I can." And that's the cool thing. It's like if you have somebody on your show that we would want on our show, I'll be like, "Hey, Richard, can you hook us up?"
Yep.
And vice versa. And that's the way it should be done. It doesn't always work that way because there's some
Well, you got
people,
a lot of haters out there.
there's a lot of people who are very selfish.
Yeah.
We've run across it.
Yeah, we asked someone in the beginning if they want to come on a podcast. They said, no, we just started our own podcast.
Yeah, so they didn't want to share. But it's great advertisement. You're coming on this show.
It's cross-advertising.
And speak all, and I say in the beginning, speak all you want about vertical momentum. It's not going to take away our listeners. If anything, it's going to add to our listeners. That's what you want. You want to grow.
It's all about friendships, but it's also like my wife. We were sitting at home one day, and she's like, "I wish I knew this." We were watching something about. She wanted to learn how to cook something, and she's like, "What do I do with this onion?" I was like, "Hold on." Started texting somebody, and I got an answer back, and I gave her the answer. She's like, "Who'd you text?" And I'm like, "I was one of the Iron Chefs, Shimon Majumdar." So she's like, "Wait a minute, you just text the guy that's on TV about my onions?" And I'm like, "Yeah, because I built that relationship for the last 6 years."
And they know that, I keep my phone contacts very close. Like I never give out numbers.
Yeah.
Even Mike, somebody who's as close to me as Mike, if somebody, "Hey, can I get Mike's number?" I will text him first and say, "Hey, this person's looking for your number. You mind if I give it?" Yeah, sure. Most of 99.99% of the time, Mike's, "Yeah, sure."
Yeah.
But I'm waiting for that one time.
That one time, then when you get to a call, no, he doesn't want me to give you his number.
Yeah, no, we're good. He lost his phone.
I gave him your number.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
what I gave him your number. If you want to
Yeah.
reach out, if he wants to reach out to you, he
But
will.
it's amazing how if you're open and willing to build real relationships, not just online relationships, podcasting is amazing.
So why don't you give out your Instagram or your social media links? Please do.
Everything is vertical momentum. If you go to vertical momentum if you Google vertical momentum, we're on the first 8 pages of Google.
All right. So that'll be easy to do.
And we're on 35 different platforms. So we're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Pinterest, Tumblr, Flickr, blah blah blah.
OnlyFans?
Not yet, because I'm staying married, so I'm not going to all these.
You can make some good money that way.
Yeah, but I got to pay the divorce lawyer, so that's not going to happen.
So, Richard, we're coming to the end of this thing here, and we end every show the same way. You've gone through this life of getting kicked out of every situation that you've ever
Even
been
a
put in.
crack house.
Even a crack house, which it shocks me. I've never heard of it. I've never heard of that. You got almost kicked out of the military twice, once for sure.
Yeah.
But you've suffered, and I know it's taught you something. So what has your suffering taught you?
Stop digging a hole. For me, it was kind of, okay, like I said, anything from ages 11 on is all my fault. So if you're going through relationship after relationship, job after job, if you're broke, if you don't have money, if you're a failure, it's your fault. And if you're in a hole, just stop digging and start saying, "I'm tired of suffering. I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired." So stop shoveling. That's what I would say. If you're suffering, just stop the insanity.
Like Susan Powder.
Exactly.
I can't believe I remember that woman's name. Rich,
You're starting to scare me with that. Stuff.
Yeah, no, I got this, like, I see the white hair, but I really do appreciate you coming in.
It's my honor.
Listen,
It's really nice meeting you.
you're like a brother, and I think we're going to do great things in the future.
Yep, man.
really
Like I
do.
said, Miss Jessica Dalby, thank you so much. Without you, this wouldn't be possible. So I want to thank her.
Well, thank you so much. And that's going to do it for this episode of the Suffering Podcast, The Suffering of Vertical Momentum with Richard Kaufman. And let's think about all the stuff that we learned. Be a walking dichotomy. A good whooping cures racism.
Yeah.
It's not a good idea to rob a cop, although it turned out pretty well for Richard. Success leaves clues. Angels are put in front of us at the right time. Humble yourself, but most importantly, we can all go from worst to first.
And stop digging.
Stop digging. I like that one. Stop digging. And that's going to do it for this episode. Don't forget to go to popple.com for a digital business card. Visit Cubita Cafe at 234 Franklin Avenue. Gus has got some wonderful food over there.
You
in
won't be
Nutley.
sorry if you go there, believe me.
Everything is handmade. It is one of my favorite places in the world. And find us on all social media. That's LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Twitter.
OnlyFans.
Follow Mike at Mike_Falaise. Follow me at Realkevindonaldson. And, of course, follow the Suffering Podcast. And we're going to see you on the next episode.